On the 8th of May 1945, Nazi Germany gave their unconditional surrender, marking the end of World War II. And then 4 days later, the first Thomas book came out. Therefore, I can only conclude that Thomas killed Hitler. The book was called The Three Railway Engines, the first of what would become the Railway series. Then, in 1984, it became the massively popular Thomas and Friends, and I watched Thomas a lot when I was a kid. I had the VHSs, the toys, I'd get annuals like these for Christmas. I was a big fan, partly because there's a train called Edward. That's my name too. I'm also long and blue. Ah, such nostalgia. Remember when the identical twin trains would prank someone, or the one that crashed into the barber shop, or that time when the creator of Thomas clashed with politicians, artists, railways, producers, unions, race relations, and then made a train hell that all the other trains are scared of, and if you go there, you die? No? Anyone? So, what's all this messy business about? And who puts hell in a kid's book? Well, first, let's paint a picture of the author of the original Thomas books, Wilbert Awdry. Wait, hang on, what does that part say? Move that train out of the way. Oh, that might be related to the stuff about hell, then. Reverend Wilbert Awdry liked steam trains. Not like a casual, oh, that's kinda neat kind of way. He was a big-time train nerd. He was as much a rail enthusiast as he was a God enthusiast. He loved trains so much that when he worked with illustrators for the Railway series, he was famously difficult. You've drawn Henry as a... I don't know what voice that is. You've drawn Henry as a 462 engine. He's meant to be a 442 engine. These points are inaccurate. Fix them. The connecting rod is going through the center of the wheels. They'd never turn. Awdry was so incredibly specific about actual railway accuracy, he burned through multiple illustrators, including one who later suffered a nervous breakdown. Probably unrelated to Thomas, but probably not helped by it either. And also the artist next of kin might be owed a ton of money in royalties, but they were just never found. What? The artists were given the unenviable job of illustrating perfectly, technically accurate real-life trains, but also with funny faces. And Awdry will be quick to tell you if anything you did was wrong, so help you God. But to Awdry's credit, the readers, many of whom were young children, would actually notice these mistakes.
James has the wrong number of wheels. He's a 260, not a 460.
In Duck and the Diesel Engine, this illustration appears to show a certain vicar gesturing to another man, perhaps a former illustrator, as it's widely believed, as if to say, now this is how you draw a train. That former illustrator, Reginald Dalby, had just quit working on the books, calling the Reverend a pedantic, remote man with whom cooperation was difficult. Reverend Awdry said that Reginald Dalby drew Percy like a green caterpillar with red stripes. So in a later story, with a different illustrator, Awdry purposely included Thomas rudely calling Percy
a green caterpillar with red stripes.
What I want to establish here was that not only was Reverend Awdry very, very committed to realism and accuracy, but he was also such a petty little bitch, and I love him for it. And if you annoy him enough, he will write you into his books. Such as this guy.
Hello.
Sir Topham Hatt, aka the Fat Controller, was introduced in the very first book, but originally named the Fat Director. And he existed to be a scathing satire of the British upper class and tycoons. Oh yeah, the top hat. Yeah, that makes sense now.
His hat blew off into a field where a goat ate it for tea.
Prior to World War II, the British railways were made of 4 big companies called the Big Four, because they were big and there were 4 of them. But then, during World War II, because it was a world war and there were 2 of them, the government commandeered the Big Four and other small railways under the Ministry of War Transport. Oh, hell yeah, that's a rad name. So a lot of the trains were utilised for military purposes, like moving soldiers and supplies around. But when the war was done, the railways were in such debt and disrepair, the railway companies went from the Big Four to the small none. And then along comes the Fat Director. Doopy-doopy-doo. The Fat Director represents a government that mistreated the trains and left it with nothing. Or, as Awdry said, bureaucrats in high places who issued directives but didn't do anything themselves to help implement it. This is evident in the sad story of Henry, where Henry blocks a tunnel and refuses to leave for fear of the rain ruining his coat of paint, so he gets bricked up.
Henry gets bricked up.
The Fat Director arrives to give orders to everyone to try and push and pull Henry out of the tunnel, but refuses to actually help himself.
Everyone pulled except the Fat Controller, because, he said, my doctor has forbidden me to pull.
The Fat Director, at least in this very, very early incarnation of him, was a parody of some of the meddling yet functionally useless government officials that were in charge of the British rails at the time. But it wouldn't stay that way forever, as when the railways got nationalised in 1948 because of the whole no money thing, the Fat Director would have his job title changed to the Fat Controller in the third book of the Railway series released the same year. Because, once again, AWDRY cares a lot about accuracy, so the books reflected what was also going on with the real British railways. And do you know what happened next on the real British railways?
All hell broke loose.
So, after becoming nationalised, the British Railways became one entity called British Railways. Alright, so the name lacks imagination, but in 1954 they had a plan to modernise the trains called the Modernisation Plan. Alright, no imagination again, but part of this plan was the mass rollout of diesel trains called dieselisation. Alright. The plan was, let's just get rid of those steam engines. We've got fancy new diesel engines now. And our AWDRY, the patron saint of pettiness, was not having any of this. In 1958, in his 13th book, Duck and the Diesel Engine, AWDRY introduced a diesel engine named Diesel. Alright, I'm sorry, did everyone in the 1950s just lose imagination? Just forgot what it was? AWDRY's portrayal of a diesel engine is not subtle.
Good morning, heard Diesel in an oily voice.
In the middle of the Venn diagram of pantomime villain, sleazy car salesman, and your sister's ex-boyfriend is Diesel. Slimy and filled to the brim with oil and the author's barely disguised bias. The character is a clear stand-in for dieselization, down to repeating how much his kind will replace the steam engines.
We know everything. We are revolutionary.
Diesel's ultimate role in the stories being to telegraph to the whole audience, "Boo diesel engines, boo I say!" Typically, anytime there's any diesel engines, you can expect full-blown train fascism.
We diesels are taking over.
AWDRY was a big fan of the Railway Gazette, with adverts for flange lubricator. Oh my. Maybe you only read it for the articles, such as the scrap heap section. This is like the funny section for people who consider train anecdotes funny. Then AWDRY used some of these anecdotal train stories and put them into his own train stories.
Have you got some bootlaces ready? And he ran off, laughing.
He didn't want the stories to have flights of fancy, so this helped him maintain a grounded realism, since the events really happened. But it also gave him dirt on diesel engines, like one of them shutting down after sucking in a bowler hat.
My hat! Exclaimed the inspector.
Aha! See everyone? Look how rubbish diesel engines are. Can't even handle a hat. Thomas once had an entire fish in him.
Fish!
In fairness, AWDRY wasn't completely anti-diesel. Over time, more non-evil diesels joined the cast of characters because it wasn't really specifically diesel engines AWDRY had a problem with. The government's modernisation plans weren't just to simply sideline steam engines for different ones, but in the name of financial efficiency and lowering costs, abandoned steam engines were left for scrap.
They'll be turned into scrap, sir. Scrap.
Scrap? Don't mention that word.
Getting scrapped is train death, and scrapyards have already existed in the world of Thomas, but change was happening in the world of steam engines, aka
the whole genocide thing.
As the fears of getting scrapped get mentioned more and more, so did a dark and haunting place. A place all the trains in Thomas feared the most. The Other Railway. First mentioned in 1957's The 8 Famous Engines, the Other Railway is where trains die.
They say, sir, that if you send them away, sir, they'll be turned into scrap, sir.
The Other Railway is train hell. But the engines on the Other Railway aren't safe now. Their controllers are cruel. They don't like engines anymore. They put them on cold, damp sidings and then, Percy nearly sobbed, they cut them up. This is like some creepypasta before creepypastas even existed. And what dark abomination is the other railway? It's British Railways. It's literally the entire British Rail. And that's not me wildly interpreting things. AWDRY openly states this at the start of this book. I told you he wasn't subtle. AWDRY was angry and upset at what British Railways were doing to trains, and so he wanted kids everywhere to know that the people in charge of British Rail were actively trying to murder Thomas the Tank Engine. Because, yeah, he's the train guy. He cared deeply about this stuff and wanted to inspire kids to join the conversation, enough to derail Thomas stories to make loud and clear political statements. All art is political. So the next time someone says to keep politics out of kids' shows, you can tell those bootlickers that Thomas the Tank Engine is a punk rock rebel. Now, it's possible to view all this as a man who is just holding on to the past and refusing to accept change and progress. That he's just a sad old man who doesn't want to let go of his old-fashioned train set. And yeah, that's absolutely part of it. It just reeks of conservatism. But on the other hand, he was probably right. Some people do agree that the modernization plan was wastefully conceived, and these diesels did kind of suck because they were rushed and untested.
I'm overheating again.
The only real saving grace was that it paved the way for the mass rollout of modern-day electric trains. Not that AWDRY cared for electric trains much either.
Is it electric? Push! Hissed Toby. You've offended him.
Now, when the TV show adapted these books some 30 years later, well after all this modernization mess had already happened and was no longer topical, they decided to creatively evade any mention of the other railway, whilst keeping the anti-diesel rhetoric, like in the Series 3 episode Escape, where Douglas helps a condemned train trying to run away from the other railway.
He had taken the midnight goods train to a station at a faraway part of the island where only the diesels work.
There is one occasion where the other railway is mentioned in the show. In the Series 4 episode, Rusty to the Rescue, Rusty actually goes to the other railway.
Where you found Oliver? You mean on the other railway?
Which is weird, since that's explicitly referring to that Escape episode where they purposely avoided saying the other railway. And what's weirder is that this episode was an original story, not one taken from a book. So they avoided mentioning the other railway when it was being adapted from the books, but then put it in when it wasn't?
It makes no damn sense.
That odd exception aside, I understand why they otherwise didn't talk about the other railway. Obviously, some changes have to be made when adapting anything from one medium to another, especially one that's making explicit references to events from decades ago, but of course, AWDRY, oh, our beloved AWDRY, he still complained about its accuracy. Enter Britt Allcroft, who discovered the Railway series in 1979 and approached AWDRY to turn his work into a TV series. AWDRY by this point had had 2 failed pilots, one that was filmed live for some reason and everything went wrong, and another made with Andrew Lloyd Webber, who wanted to make a musical version of Thomas. And when that fell through, he instead made Starlight Express. That's right, Starlight Express is a Thomas the Tank Engine fanfic. AWDRY was sceptical about another TV attempt, but eventually, in 1984, Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends came to TV, forever changing my brain chemistry and for many, many others. Gone is a lot of the anti-government subtext. The Fat Controller is not the Fat Director, so refusing to help push or pull Henry out the tunnel is more like a silly laziness joke rather than poking fun at politicians being useless. The Diesels still talk about replacing trains, but now framed it's like their inflated ego rather than train murder. And the other railway is never mentioned. Except that one time. It's still weird. Despite Britt Allcroft's efforts to be faithful to the spirit of the books, whilst also, trying to make a successful kids' TV show and not go bankrupt, AWDRY was there, with pages upon petty pages of notes and corrections, seemingly never satisfied.
They only revealed their lamentable ignorance of railway practice.
God, I do not envy Britt Allcroft's position having someone like Awdry on her back the whole time, and from what I can tell, she was very, very accommodating. Obviously, the books can only provide material for so many episodes, and eventually new episodes had to be created, including some Britt Allcroft wrote, such as one about Henry in a forest who stops to admire the trees, and uh-oh, that goes against the railway code. You can't do it.
You can't do it.
That's against the rules.
They've shown a lamentable ignorance of Rule 55.
I bet they have a lamentable ignorance for Rule 34 as well.
Britt has unfortunately written some of her own stories.
Ah, nice to see Awdry's kids also inherit his trademark pettiness. As the show went on beyond Awdry's books, Thomas has visited other railways and they have visited him. So notions of a terrifying other railway have completely faded away. Apart from one fleeting mention in 2016's The Great Race.
Hello, are you from the other railway?
Which definitely sounds like a less scary place now. Also, the trains can sing.
I bring some razzle-dazzle to the yard.
Is that in the railway code? Well, at least Andrew Lloyd Webber finally got his wish. Anyway, if Awdry invented a train hell, then what would be train heaven? The island of Sodor. Yep, it's the island of Sodor. So what's interesting is, as the earliest books started out, where the stories are actually set is never explicitly stated. There is no Sodor. We get pretty generic locations like The Shed, The Big Station, and Gordon's Hill from that one time Gordon got stuck up a hill. God, imagine naming places on your island after train trauma. That would be like naming this Henry's Tunnel.
Whee! He whistled as he rushed through Henry's Tunnel.
I should have seen that coming. But it wasn't until the 1950s did we start to see something starting to appear in the illustrations. You see, in 1949's Tank Engine Thomas again, Thomas and a bus named Bertie have a race, and Awdry's own kids said, "Hey, that's not fair. Bertie has way more hazards on the road than Thomas does on tracks." So Awdry drew a map of the rail and the roads from the race to show it was fair and that his kids were wrong to question him. And this planted the idea of plotting out more and more of this land. See, to me it always felt like Thomas was set in some vague, non-specific part of the UK, like part of England or part of Wales, with some fictionalised station names like Tidmouth, Knapford and but not some fictional fairy tale land. Then during the 1950s, real-life locations start to get mentioned in the books, and eventually things start getting really specific, like the other railway and the Fat Controller's railway. There's no vagueness, there's a definitive distinction being made now. The source for many of his stories was now over there. Instead of reflecting the real-world changes to railways because of his dedication to accuracy, now Awdry is rebelling against the real-world railways and said, "Screw you! I'm making my own island, where I make my own rules, and no one can stop me doing anything I want." Release the Sodor files. Eventually, the island of Sodor came to be. Here it is in relation to the rest of the UK. And it's not just an island, it's its own country. It has a flag. Oh, it looks like a train track. Neat. Also, a rich and detailed history, thanks to Awdry's book, The Island of Sodor, Its People, History and Railways, published in 1987, containing fun details, such as there being an all-girls school using the former estate of somebody from the East India Company. Oh, goody! Slavery happened in Thomas. I don't remember that episode. And to be fair, this school has never appeared in any Thomas media. Hey, wait a minute. Now we're talking. All right, so it's supposed to be around about here. All right, let's go. Getting pretty close. What? Oh, come on. Well, I tried. Other history includes the native Sundrian people, and their reaction to the English, especially politicians, is quite telling. Remember, Awdry is not subtle.
Know what I mean? Nudge, nudge.
Sundrians have learned the art of putting officious and official people in their place. Anything which does not conform to Sundrian common sense or their idea of the fitness of things is politely yet firmly ignored. Yep, the UK government made Awdry so mad he invented a whole race of people to also be angry at them. Hell hath no fury like a vicar scorned, I guess. And despite this now having been over 30 years after the fact, he still can't resist giving a dig at those past illustrators again, including creating fictional characters complaining, "I cannot think that artist had ever seen the place he was attempting to draw." Wilbur, mate, let it go! The island of Sodor, which is now where all the Thomas stories have taken place, is the safe haven for steam engines. If the other railway is death, this place is salvation. In 1968's Enterprise in Engines, Gordon's last remaining unmurdered brother, the Flying Scotsman, says how lucky he is to have a controller who knows how to run a railway. And because every train praises him, seeks his approval, and devotes themselves to him, the Fat Controller is basically God.
I don't think really that was the original concept, but Father being a clergyman, maybe it was a subconscious one.
Name me a bigger character arc than government buffoon to actual deity who lives in a big mansion. Not a normal house, a mansion. Right. There is a sort of hierarchy to the trains. Some trains appear to have greater prestige than others, but no matter who they are, the Fat Controller rules over them all, and everyone is fine with this. They have to fulfill the role assigned to them and continually prove their worth, their usefulness. And if they act up, then the Fat Controller isn't afraid to punish trains, like brick them up.
Henry gets bricked up.
So, yes, Sodor is a safe haven for trains, with some caveats. This isn't a train sanctuary.
Stop crying. It won't do any good. And anyway, you have a lot of work to do, starting right now.
This heaven is sounding less and less appealing now. So, truth be told, I don't think AWDRY was intentionally making a train heaven and hell. Remember, the man isn't subtle. I'm sure being irreverent influenced his writing, like when a train dares to do any out-of-line free thinking.
I'm tired of pushing coaches. I want to see the world.
By the end of the episode, they face consequences and learn to get back in line.
But I think he deserved his punishment. Don't you?
No! No, I don't. For example, Thomas wishes he could go fishing.
I want to fish.
But when his driver accidentally pours a live fish into Thomas's boiler, Thomas suffers a breakdown.
Fish don't suit you, Thomas, so you mustn't do it again.
Once again, Thomas wanted something and immediately faced consequences for wanting it. The lesson is, never want stuff? To be clear, this is not a blanket statement on religion. As a whole, I'm on thin ice already, and I'm not about to start fires on it too. This is just AWDRY's outlook, as evident through his works. That old-fashioned conservatism, be really useful or get out of the way. In one story, the trains went on strike because they didn't like how they were being treated, so they were sidelined and replaced. Henry, Gordon and James stayed shut in the shed and were cold, lonely and miserable.
They wish now they hadn't been so silly.
So he's anti-strike action too. So this is why the Isle of Sodor doesn't have a trade union. But of course, they're trains. Trains are made to work. This is what they do. But once you stick a face on it and make it feel emotions, it makes them practically people, and that sends messages to young fans. The trains in Thomas are basically children, just like their audience, which is why they see themselves in the characters. The trains make mistakes and learn lessons, but these lessons steer towards complete conformity to a system which only works if the system, this hierarchy, is infallible, which it never is. For example, I'm a dad, and I fuck up all the time. I once carelessly opened my bathroom door and I didn't know my son was on the other side, and I fully whacked him in the face. So in our parent-child hierarchy, should I punish my son for being in the way, or do I learn to knock?
But I think he deserved his punishment. Don't you?
Anyway, AWDRY wasn't infallible. In 1972, an issue was raised about one story where Henry puffed some smoke at some children who were throwing stones, and AWDRY said that they were as black as N-words. Now, some more defensive folk might say, yes, this is a bad word, and this was always a bad word. But Eddie, you have to understand, this is from a different time where people didn't fully understand the word, and it got changed to black as soot in later publications, and he apologized, so it's fine now. And yeah, you'll be right. AWDRY did change the word, but not without a fight. A petty fight. In this Daily Telegraph article, he said that the complaint is rubbish, and he blamed it on the race relations industry, which wasn't true. He added, I don't know what the alternative would be. If you say blackers, chimney sweeps, or miners, you have their unions up in arms. So he whines like a little pissy baby, and then he says the N-word a bunch more times. Eventually, he did agree to the word change, but only after pressure had been applied. And if you feel it's unfair that I bring up something he did so long ago, then tell that to AWDRY, still dogging on illustrators decades after the fact, including Reginald Dalby, who he directly complained about only 4 years after the man had died. Whatever happened to forgiveness, Reverend AWDRY? And speaking of complaining, what about Brit?
Do you feel that those television programs are still your work?
No.
Let's be honest, the show is better than the books. I appreciate that the books have got a lot of attention to detail, and they did really well. But Brit Allcroft made it into a phenomenal global success, an icon that remains strong with every generation since. It has brought together fans, young and old, including those on the spectrum. Thomas and Friends is probably one of the most impactful children's shows ever. And yes, that is thanks to the groundwork laid by AWDRY, but mostly the spearheading of Brit Allcroft. And let's not forget the money. Prior to Brit's company buying the entire rights of the Thomas franchise in 1998, the AWDRY family said that they had earned £4 million in royalties, not just for the books, and it was probably more than that. Enough to set them up for life.
Brit has unfortunately written some of her own stories.
Where's the grace? Where's the humility? You can't muster any because Brit Allcroft had the audacity to write a story about a train that looks at a tree?
Now, what interest does a steam locomotive have in scenery?
I don't know, AWDRY. What interest would a steam locomotive have for fish?
I want to fish.
I think some hardcore Thomas fans might be mad at me now. Okay, look, no. AWDRY was not infallible, and no one claimed that he was. There's something humanizing in AWDRY's constant perfectionism whilst being far from perfect himself. You know, humans are complicated things. We don't have to deify him just because he wrote some decent books. Ultimately, he was just a big train nerd, and that can be a sort of religion in of itself. Perhaps that partly explains why Thomas has such a passionate cult following, including myself. So, perhaps to redeem myself a little, let me explain how Thomas changed my life forever. In 2001, the UK's National Autistic Society ran a survey and found that 57% of children on the spectrum latch onto Thomas before any other character. But given its sample size was just 81 parents, maybe that survey isn't so accurate. So in 2007, they repeated the survey again, this time with 750 parents. That's a bit better. And this survey found that 58% of children on the spectrum latch onto Thomas before any other character. Wait a minute. That's an eerily similar number. How can the results from a much larger survey be practically identical? This second survey is supported by Hit Entertainment, who owned Thomas at the time, and would certainly be very grateful to get a glowing endorsement from an official authority on autism with something like, Thomas and Friends had clearly had a beneficial influence on the lives of children with autism in our study and their parents. So Thomas is really good, says the people who sell Thomas things. Seems a bit more like a sales tactic to me, but I guess they never said this was a truly scientific study. Buy the toys! I was originally going to do a whole section about the relationship between Thomas and autism, the numbers, the colours, the clear and identifiable emotions akin to an expression chart, the fact that it's a low stimulation show, so it's more relaxing to watch and decompress and self-regulate. I'd originally written 2 paragraphs about why this sequence of Thomas's driver pulling up a bucket of water is one of the greatest scenes in movie or TV history ever. Truly hypnotising. But to conflate autism with a commercial brand that wants to sell toys and DVDs, if I may follow AWDRY's example for a moment, is that accurate?
No.
I think autism exists, Thomas exists, and sometimes that crosses over and other things also cross over. And yes, Thomas is popular with autistic fans, but let autistic people find their interests naturally rather than sold it. So, with all that in mind and fully aware of the irony, here is my own Thomas and autism story. When I was very young, I was diagnosed with having severe receptive expressive language disorder, and this all fell under the umbrella of my previously diagnosed autistic tendencies. At 3 years old, I still only knew a handful of words like alright and mum look, but the rest of the time I basically made up my own jargon language. But hey, at least I had good intonation. So around 5 years old, when I decided to take a ride in what I can only describe as a bicycle graveyard, I joined my first school. But I wasn't fully in the actual school part of school, as I spent most of my time with the specialized speech therapy department, because God, I needed it. So they helped develop my speech, language, socializing, and spoiler alert, it worked. But when I was around 6-7 years old, around the time I decided to look like an evil murder-loving child from a 1980s horror movie, we were doing an art lesson, and I wanted to paint my 3 favorite trains: Edward, Henry, and James. I didn't understand this at the time, but this wowed my teachers, and not because it was like a really good painting of a train. I was 7. For context, here's how I drew Bart Simpson. It's Bart and his dog. According to my teachers at the time, when most kids paint a train, they either do so face on or from the side. I had projected myself onto a fictional bridge and painted what I imagined I could see. I'm sure there were other developmental factors too, but this was the impetus for my teachers to decide I was finally ready to be fully integrated into my school. I am who I am because of that decision, and I owe it all to a painting of a train. The painting was actually framed and hung on the wall of the school corridor for years, and what did the painting look like? I don't know. The painting was lost. I have tried contacting my old school, even just for a photograph of it, but no luck, I'm afraid. So I did my best to try to recreate the painting, and this is what all the fuss was about. Just like our look at AWDRY, maybe something designed for children can still reveal a lot about its creator in surprising ways. That we both struggled to get along with others, but we found a way to express ourselves through something creative, with a little help from a train. Except remember those Thomas annuals I got when I was a kid? Yeah, I didn't invent anything. Child me stole this painting from a book. From memory. Autistic tendencies? More like autistic as fuck! So remember when I mentioned Andrew Lloyd Webber tried to make a Thomas musical and instead made Starlight Express?
Starlight Express! Starlight Express!
Can anything transportation-based be turned into a musical? Like, what about the movie Cars? Can we make Cars into a musical? Well, Shea Thrillers Productions has been experimenting with that very idea and more in his brand new series, Make It a Musical, where he takes a look at the classics, determines how it would work as a stage musical, and figures out where the hypothetical music numbers would go. I mean, if I were in charge, it would just be Life is a Highway on repeat for 2 hours, so I would trust Shea Thriller's judgment here more than mine. But I love these sort of oddball thought experiments of questions I never thought to ask and then someone did and now I'm obsessed. And Shea Thriller's series is just one of the incredible plethora of exclusive videos you can watch right now on Nebula. Nebula is a prestigious video streaming service that I am honored I get to be a part of, with exclusive originals, early access videos, and ad-free, all while supporting creators like myself, including many of my absolute favorites like Lindsay Ellis, Tom Scott, Captain Disillusion, and Nebula originals like the globe-trotting Jetlag the Game and comedy debate show Abolish Everything, which are only available on Nebula. And the list just keeps growing and growing. Right now, Nebula is offering a whopping 50% off if you sign up for a Nebula subscription today. Go to go.nebula.tv/Eddache and get Nebula now for just £30 for the entire year, which is just £2.50 a month. So if you'd like to check out Shea Thriller's Make It a Musical series and more, check out the link in the description or scan the QR code and start watching right now. Oh, he crashed into the QR code. Huh.
I want to fish.
Special thanks to all my patrons, including Antraptor, Bubbles, Moel Kasemi, Drifter Star, Vinny Vex, Beamer Tectonic, Setsune Wave, Glenn Sugden, Skydream, Trenton Gyrone, JBG 0801, Bees Churga, TDW Fan, Benjamin Allen, Teletoon, Zion Craze, Brett Halford, Matthew Smith, Clam Wamtley, Harper Onions, Blondie Cartoons, Ephraim Smith, and Pontus Buryessen. And if you would like to consider supporting me, then please do so on Patreon.